Aaron Doan from Aaron Doan State Farm Insurance. How you doing?
Great, Chris. Good morning, Chris Nichols.
Hey, good morning to you. Let's talk about the topic today: shopping, house shopping. Do you rent or do you buy? And we want to kind of get that angle of from the insurance standpoint. Does it make sense? You know, recently, Aaron, the economic development director, Lucas Zimmerman, she and Patrick from the research company there in Ohio. They did this research here in the Mason County area, and by far it says that we need like 24 to 2,500 more units here in the area in the next 5 minutes just to stay up with things. And I think the other big thing, Aaron, that came out from this report was that most people in this area can't afford to buy a house right now. And it's shocking to see that. So a lot of those factors in itself kind of lean me into this conversation being more on the rent side. But can we break through that and still buy and afford it here?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to take a couple probably builders, and we have some younger builders. And what I mean by that is, builders that are establishing themselves right now and their reputation, doing additions, doing renovations, and a couple of them, just starting to build. I know one of them has built their own home, and in fact, they told me that they want to try to get a price point of about $250 a square foot. And I know the average listener listens to that number and hears that. That's still obviously a pretty big number, 1,000 square foot at $250,000. But I think that's the current market right now that we're in. But to be able to build that home, maybe for some it's the second home that they can get into, or they go from renting after a few years to a home like that. So he's hoping to build actually a development, where at least to start to click away at that 2,500, maybe he builds 100 home in a development. And that's really what we need is, some of those types of builders to help us to have the housing we need.
You've been here for a long time. Do you see that that we can break through this? Have we gone through some of these waves over time or not?
In 20 years as an agent here, my wife's from here, and we've visited here for almost for me personally for over 35 years. We haven't broken through that yet. I mean, we definitely have these developments that'll have 10, 15, maybe even 20 homes, but and I get it. We don't necessarily want to just have this sprawling area of homes, but at the same time, we definitely have the need. And if we can get closer to that curve over the next 10 years, it'll bring pricing and housing down. And Chris, I know we might get into this a little bit later, but I think this next year will also be, a pretty challenging year for interest rates, But I think prices are going to come down a little bit for housing. So that going into this year, that's definitely going to help, even with the higher interest rates. If prices come down 10, 20, 30,000, that's going to make it a lot more affordable for a lot more people.
We're talking with Aaron Doan from Aaron Doan State Farm Insurance this morning. The topic, rent versus buy. Let's take the pros of this. Builds equity over time. An owner may borrow accumulated equity as well. When you're talking with your clients, your customers in front of you, do you have conversations like that in regards to these benefits of buying versus renting?
Quite honestly, virtually every day. What we're seeing is, about 2/3 of our new homeowner type policies are renters. Okay. So in that indication, that means that, yes, that could be a long-term renter and they love to rent. But some of those people are, going to consider, at some point they'd like to buy a home if they can afford it. So I think the conversation that we just try to have is just walking them through some of those things to be considering from a savings standpoint, and buying right, if you will, and kind of letting them know what the insurance, difference in premium might be. So just trying to educate them. And, I actually do have my license as a mortgage loan originator. Don't do a lot of business in that space, but at the same time, I understand mortgages. I've had, in terms of original and refinancing myself at 56 years old about 10 mortgages. So I kind of understand that marketplace too, and I can help people, as an added service and value, doing business with us.
They used to say years ago, and maybe it's still the case, that if you can buy, and because if you're renting, you're buying multiple times, right? In the sense, do you feel that most people feel that way now, or think that way, or is it like, hey, you know what? I'm going to rent, and I'm okay with that. Where do you think most people stand at this point?
Yeah, I would say it's probably still on the renter side. For most people, maybe let's just say in their 20s, just coming up with that 3.5% to 5% down that they're going to need minimally. That's what you're going to have. So if you think about a $200,000 house, coming up with 10 grand, that's a real number.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find a $200,000 house, you need to have, somewhere at least around $10,000. And that takes, months to accumulate, with the rents being as high as they are. It can be done. And obviously, I think we can talk about that as well. But I think more people are leaning, Chris, on the renter side right now, just for sheer economics, especially coming through all this inflation.
But I guess the flip side of that question is, do you see that people are paying more by renting from an insurance standpoint versus home ownership, or is there more on that policy because they're a homeowner, and that's where that's where a lot of their money is going?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for the most part, I see, renters' premiums being about $250 a year, where the, average home now, $200,000 home is, close to $1,000 a year in premium. So that's just in terms of that number. But I will tell you, Chris, here's an interesting thing, and I think this is going to play out more this next year, is that rents have traditionally been a little bit higher than a mortgage that in a similar size home. So let's just say you're looking in that transition, you actually might save a couple $100 a month with having a mortgage, including insurance and taxes. So people go, wait, really? Yeah, I said, yes, because once you get into that home, you have that $10,000 down. When they do the amortization, which is a fancy word for how much it's going to cost per month over the life of your mortgage, you're going to have that number be lower. So it's the pain, if you will, of saving, for 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, right, to get to that point where you have enough for the down payment. And then I think in most economies, you're going to find your mortgage for a similar size home is going to be less than your rent. So.
And there's pros and cons to both. I mean, I think people are going to look at it as, if they're renting, hey, I'm comfortable. I understand I've got some restrictions versus if you're a homeowner, you can do updates and construction. And if you want to blow out that wall, go ahead and do it.
Yeah,
right?
Knock yourself out.
Absolutely. So there's always going to be benefits. When you have that conversation, when somebody walks through the door, I guess let me ask this question. Do many people walk through the door and say, hey, I'm renting right now. What are my options for buying? And are you able to, when they walk out, have them feel comfortable about that next decision in their life? Can you do that from an agent standpoint?
Yeah, I think from my perspective as a human, as an American, as a consumer, at this stage of life, been through enough experiences of buying and selling and helping enough others. Yeah, I think, in fact, my staff as well, all having but quite a bit of experience in this space. So I think a lot of times it's not always a direct into that where we'll get asked the question about renting versus home, but it's through the conversation about their, what they're doing in their life. We try to find out about their family and their occupation and what they like to do for fun and, how they're doing financially. Are they able to save some? Or are things super tight? And so kind of since you dove into this space, Chris, I think that if somebody said, you know what, we'd love to rent, but I think we'd really like to own a home someday. So it's kind of like, let's go for it. Well, I think it's going to take some sacrifices. I think that this is probably the biggest challenge for 20-somethings and in some cases, people older for sure, that are at a different stage of life. But maybe not doing that extra coffee or a week, that you're buying. You're actually, making coffee at home. Some of your streaming services, you take some of them off, and here's the hard one. Well, what about this? You work an extra, you find another little part-time job, 10 hours a week, and all of that gets saved for the down payment of buying a home. Can you imagine that? I mean, how powerful that would be, saving that extra money, and you do that for a couple of years, not forever, but now you got that down payment, you get the home, and then possibly your mortgage is, like I said, a couple $100 less than your rent.
Let me ask you the reverse side of that. And if you're just joining us, we're talking with Erin Doan from Erin Doan State Farm Insurance. You can watch this on our Facebook page, both 102.7 Mom FM and Hot Country Hits. We're streaming at both pages there, and our YouTube channel too. The question is that we've always kind of positioned ourselves or thought about that the ultimate goal is to buy. But do you have people that come through your office that are homeowners now that are, because we talk about downsizing later in life, right? Do people go from home ownership to renting?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
In fact, that's a phenomenon in my lifetime that I haven't seen as much as lately. And oh, by the way, it's not just seniors that are retiring. I've seen a lot of people in their 40s and 50s that may have owned a home for 10 or 20 years. Or more, and they are renting. And part of that is a little bit of the economies of the market. We still have so much demand for homes in the market that people are selling their homes for a really good price. And so they're taking, if you will, the extra money that and a lot of times people really weren't expecting 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and they're putting that in the bank. And then they're going to rent. The challenge is finding that rental place and doing that at a time where there is something to rent. As you know, Chris, you mentioned to me off air, just finding a place to rent is super tough. So you almost have to kind of play both sides of those angles. But yes, people are definitely going back to renting, selling their home. And obviously that's helping the market to an extent for people to get into a home that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Well, and with the economic development report that came out, the housing assessment report that came out, I'm telling you, I mean, it looks like it would be, and I say a gold mine, but it truly is. If you built an apartment complex, it would be full overnight.
And literally they are. I mean, you think about the one on Washington Avenue here in Ludington, and I know when that gentleman built that, it was basically full in a few months. And I don't know how many units ended up being over there across from the car wash there, but boom, build it, and full. And the same thing with these nice projects, down here on Ludington Avenue. Those were, HUD homes to start in terms of rental, and they're all full. Just literally, as most people in our, West Michigan, area know, it got full very fast.
Absolutely. When I guess before we wrap up, what is that major difference if you had to single out just one? Between somebody deciding to rent or deciding to buy. Let's just say it's, I don't know. I mean, I'll just throw it out there. I won't put any more details into the scenario, but, what is that major difference that comes to mind? One word:
flexibility.
Okay.
Right? So to me, flexibility means in renting is that you as long as that rent can stay relatively similar from year to year, you have the flexibility of making a decision every year when your lease comes due. Are we staying here? Are we going somewhere else? And I think in that flexibility too, it's part of the maintenance and things that are going on. You have the flexibility of, not dealing with, the pipe. The landlord's got to help you fix that pipe that just had a little leak, or the toilet. That's pretty powerful. And then I think just flexibility of coming and going, just seems to be a lot easier for renters, with their home, especially people that like to travel, or people that, there's people that do remote working, and even people that do travel work. I think there's some flexibility, especially if they're, mobile and they would like to work in another city. You know, I have friends that, you know, they're traveling nurses. Their daughters are traveling nurses. Been to, I think in the past 2 years, 6 different cities. I think of my daughter who lives in Chicago, and she got a job while she was in D.C. out of California, and now she lives in Chicago working remotely, renting. And she loves it. She's right down in a little northern neighborhood of Chicago and thinks it's, you know, the cat's meow.
Yeah,
so, you know, I mean, she just loves it. So it just, that flexibility is probably the biggest thing. You don't have as much flexibility when you're a homeowner. You're tied to that mortgage, you're tied to that home, and you have maintenance and things that happen that you have to fix.
That's a very good point. Anything we forgot to talk about this morning in regards to this topic? Any advice that you want to give to the listener or viewer before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of just doing a self-evaluation for who you are and start to think. I think here's the challenge is just to sit down and have a conversation, you know, with your significant other, your spouse, and go, you know, what are we thinking over the next year or 2 or 3, maybe 5 years? And, you know, is this working for us? What is our family going to be? Is it going to increase or decrease in size? And really just take some time to put some numbers on paper. I think if there's something you can hear from me today is that if you haven't bought a home and you do, you know, you're good with renting, but what do I got to really do? I think the number in the back of your mind is set up that separate savings account and work really hard to come up with 10 grand. You get 10 grand, you're going to have a lot better chance to be ready to buy a home that's right priced, right sized. You guys can move on that home really quickly. You have 10 grand, that is a game changer.
Very good. And that can be done within,
over a lot of months, it can be done. Yep.
Absolutely. All right. Aaron Doan from Aaron Doan State Farm Insurance. We always encourage our listeners and viewers to reach out to you and your team. How can they do that?
Yeah, we're four team members that work for me, licensed. We'd love to help you. We're on US 10, a half a mile east in Ludington of Meyer. You can reach us at 231-757-3115, or you can find us on Facebook at Aaron Doan Insurance, ERINDOAN.
All right, sounds good. Aaron, thanks for taking some time with us this morning.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. 8:33 now here on 102.7 WMOM and